Robin Hood Radio and the Robin Hood Radio Network is proud to present Leonard Lopate at Large, lively hour-long in-depth discussions providing overviews and context to topics usually covered in partial measures. His guests include leading thinkers, scientists, artists, economists, farmers, historians, authors, and politicians. Mr. Lopate is a Peabody Award winner whose numerous honors include 3 Associated Press Awards and 3 James Beard Awards.
Welcome to Leonard Lopate at Large. I'm Leonard Lopate. Wadada Leo Smith is a trumpeter, multi-instrumentalist, composer, improviser, and writer who describes his musical approach as creative music. He has released more than 50 albums as a leader, and his diverse discography serves as something of a recorded history of the social, natural, and political environment of our times. Along the way, Mr. Smith has received many awards, and he topped 3 categories in 2017's Downbeat International Critics Poll: Best Jazz Artist, Trumpeter of the Year, and Jazz Album of the Year. That year, he was also honored by the Jazz Journalists Association as their Musician of the Year. He joins us now to discuss his music and his writings and the musical notation system he's invented and called Ankh-Ramation, I guess it is. Welcome.
Ankh-Ramation, yes.
Ankh-Ramation. Welcome to our show.
Well, thanks, Leonard. I'm very happy to be here, and of course, looking forward to our journey.
You lead an electric ensemble called Organic and a more traditional jazz group called the Golden Quartet. You've written for string quartets, orchestras, solo cello, as well as gamelan and Kyoto ensembles. Where do you see yourself as situated in the jazz world?
Very much outside of it, and not even recognized by people that really call themselves jazz. They say, like, well, who is this Wadada Leo Smith? He doesn't play jazz, you know. So
Do you think you play jazz?
No, I'm a loner. Mm-hmm. I play music, which I call creative music. And in the process of creating music, I use the word create to define how I construct it and how my musicians construct it as part of the dialogue of building a piece of music.
But isn't all good music creative music?
Yes, it is. All good music is creative music, but some music needs to be named creative. And the reason for that is because if you take out what's composed in that performance and only have that music that's made in the present moment, you would lose completely the whole meaning of that piece of music. And with music that are called creative and that we understand as being creative, if you don't take anything away from them, because can't nothing be taken away, you see. Because if you take away Mozart's score, or you take away Bach's score or Stravinsky's score, you end up destroying them, you see. But when you play what they put in there, those composers put in there, it's actually that. And see, with creative music, it's a collective dialogue and a collective journey.
Well, Bach, of course, also improvised.
Well, yes, we have rumors of that, but we don't have no proof.
Well, we don't know what he improvised because then there were no recordings.
Yes.
But
and the reason why improvisation never became, quote, popular during those times is because the printed press was the phenomenon in which things spread from town to town and village to village.
No, so is most of your music written out, or we'll get into how you write it out, but later.
It's let's say it this way. A lot of it is like the piece I just did. Well, National Parks. National Parks is 26 has 26 pages, 6 pieces and 26 pages of music. Mm-hmm. Okay, some people with 26 pages will have about 40 or 60 or 70 pieces of music on it. You see. Mm-hmm. So
and is there any improvisation along the way?
There's a create in it, which that's what I call that making of the music create. There's a lot of that in it as well. It's a balance in which it's almost impossible to distinguish what is what. And the reason for that is because my music is non-metrical, meaning that the melodic parts and the rhythmic parts are placed in construction by long and short relationships to each other.
Your thinking about that, I assume, began with the 1972 solo album that you called Creative Music 1. And on that album, You played trumpet, flugelhorn, wooden flute, harmonica, hand zithers, assortment of percussion instruments set up on steel poles, bells, gongs, xylophones, cymbals, whistles, aluminum pot-drawn drums, metal plates,
Yes.
and also you included long periods of silence.
Yes, yes, yes. Now,
That's not John Cagean, is
no,
it?
that's not John Cage at all, because remember John Cage is a silent piece. There's no music there, you see. And if you look at that and you look at the term or the idea or the philosophy of performance, that means that John Cage's silence is never performed because there's no music there.
The pianist just sits there and lets people cough in the audience.
That's a stage a presentation of action. But if you look at I actually have a piece that's called Silence that was recorded in 1969.
Ooh, that early.
And it has 9 notes in it. It was Anthony Braxton, Leroy Jenkins, and I. And each of us had 3 notes. The notes was based off of our birth sign, our opposite birth sign, and our rising sign. And so the 3 notes we evolved from that. From the beginning note to where the create section starts, it takes 9 minutes. So now you imagine what silence like in that context. It's very beautiful. But let me capitalize it just to show you what I mean. I have a friend by the name of Robert Lewis. This guy is a fantastic painter. He suffered from different kinds of depression and stuff like that, but he's our friend, very good guy. Okay, so the premier Silence, he came and he sat in the front row, and he fell asleep. Okay, and after the Silence was over, which was the end of the concert, it was Braxton, Leroy, and me. He came up and he put his arm around all 3 of us, and he said, "Listen, guys, that was the best sleep I've had in my life." So my music is therapeutic. That's what I'm trying to get to.
But I'm assuming that you also saw that album, Creative Music 1, as a kind of a musical manifesto. You
Yes.
even published a book around that time that explained your music philosophy.
Yes.
Notes, 8 pieces, source a new world music, creative music.
Yes. Yes.
And did you think that a lot of people would become followers and adopt
I
what
didn't
you
really
were
care.
coming up with?
You know, the reason I didn't care is because, in America, you got a lot of people that pioneer stuff or do stuff that they don't look for people to follow them. Like David Thoreau, for example. That's a good example. I think Thelonious Monk never wanted or intended anybody to follow him.
Well, the Randy Weston did pretty good.
Well, there are a lot of them guys that do a lot of good at it. But personally, I think that he didn't want people to do that. You know, a good example is Lester Young complained about all the people that followed him.
Right.
You know, so no, I wasn't looking for followers or candidates or neophytes and stuff like that. I came in life to make my journey. I'm going to make it no matter what's in front of me.
And I've read that you took classes in ethnomusicology at Wesleyan, where you discovered the affinities between Black American music and the improvisatory traditions of West Africa, Indonesia, Japan. That was at a time when, or at least not long after, jazz musicians had become interested in the Indian musical improvisatory tradition. Are all improvisatory approaches similar in some ways?
What you find out is that I would define all those traditions that we just talked, that you just mentioned. I would define that none of them are actually having using that quote improvisation word, have improvisatory tradition, and that's the main reason I jumped out of improvisation. I use the word create because it's a far more demanding requirement for making art. And so in African traditions, they paraphrase things. When the drum orchestras that got, let's say, anywhere from 6 to 25 drummers, their sense of freshness come when the rhythm overlap and you cannot tell where it's at. And the way that they keep time on it is they know what the low bell is the marker. That by said dong 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 down dong 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 bam. So when it's crossing like that, you create this Pan-African, pan-rhythmical sort of stretch, and that stretch is that creative part of their music. And in Japan and in India, they'll learn traditions of how that music explored. I'm talking about traditional music that use that stuff. Modern players, though, of course, they may create. You see, modern players do.
But so when you start performing, do you pretty much know what you're going to be playing, or
Have no idea, none.
in that way it's similar to jazz? Although you're not performing on chord changes or
No,
anything like
no.
that.
But it's actually I would say it's similar to all music. I'm going to make a performance that I hope you will believe and accept.
You've also studied the works of American composers like Charles Ives
Yes.
and Charles Ruggles. What did you learn from them?
Well, I learned from Ives a very important something is that you never wait to be discovered.
Well, he sold insurance to make a living.
I know he did. He made millions of dollars in the insurance industry, and he also transformed the concept of insurance, meaning this, he's the one that made insurance available to ordinary people. So he was very creative. Mm-hmm. So
also a great composer.
A great composer. What do I mean by wait to be discovered? If he had that much money, all of his music should have been recorded, all of it. And all of it wasn't recorded. Only a limited amount of his music was recorded. To me, that's tragic.
Yeah, well, but eventually he came to be considered one of the great American composers.
He is, because he was a great composer. He understood the American spiritual
and he also liked improvisation. He once set up I saw a concert in which two different groups were set up on different sides of the stage with two different directors.
Yeah, that's antiphonic. yes. The steeper piece is like that, which come from the bells from 4 different churches and different ensembles in different spots, you know. But those are not really important pieces. His important piece is the Fourth Symphony and the 3 Places in New England and the Unanswered Question, and the other one is Central Park. Those are his famous works. You know, I could write thousands of books about them.
The Unanswered Question is really one of the most mysterious pieces ever composed. Wonderful. But in your case, all of this studying led you to play several world music instruments, including the Kyoto, the kalimba, and a Ghanaiese bamboo flute.
It's called a tentabine.
And that on top of trumpet and flugelhorn?
Yes.
And you've also taught courses in instrument making?
Yes, I taught that at Bard College.
So, do you like
for 5
teaching?
years?
You've taught in many institutions,
well,
many major
4
institutions.
major institutions, and yes, I love teaching. I retired in 2013, and now I don't teach anymore, and would not accept teaching anything anywhere to anybody. If someone wants to learn something from me, they would have to come to my house and come in as a guest and just learn from what I do.
I'm speaking to Wadada Leo Smith, who is best known as a trumpeter, but obviously plays a lot of different instruments. Doesn't your early musical history suggest that you would have gone in a different direction? You grew up in Leland, Mississippi, which is a Delta town, and at 13 you began performing with your stepfather, a well-known bluesman named Alex Little Bill Wallace, one of the pioneers of the electric guitar in Delta blues.
Yes. When I started playing the trumpet at the age of 12, that very first week, my desire was to make great music. That was my desire. And many times I was
instilled in you by your stepfather?
And my stepfather, and also being able to sit in that living room on a Sunday afternoon when they wasn't playing, where they would play the guitar. Him and several of his buddies, including Little Milton, would be in some of those groups.
Elmore James. B.B. King came to your house?
Yes. They was set
before he was famous?
No, he was famous. B.B. King was born famous, you know. I mean, anybody got a name of B.B. King, You know, he's got to be famous from the birth. You know, they would sit there and play. They would drink, of course, alcohol, and they would tell jokes. And it was a tradition where they would try to one-up each other on the jokes. But the jokes are told with them playing electric guitars with no amplifiers. No amplifier.
Mm-hmm.
It's spectacular. And so I grew up listening to, sitting on the couch, listening to that until I fall asleep.
Mm.
You know.
Hearing some of the legendary musicians of your time.
Yes.
And then you played in high school marching bands.
Yes.
Also, but you played a lot of other instruments. You played drums, mellophones, French horn. When did you decide that trumpet was your primary instrument?
Well, I never decided. My teacher one day, I think the second week or the first week of the trumpet, was kind of annoyed at me playing the mellophone. He wasn't as annoyed as I was, but he was annoyed.
Why were you annoyed?
I'm going to tell you in a minute.
Huh.
So he jumps up and he goes out of the room and opens the door across the hall, and he tells the guy, which was my friend, his name was Henry, he tells Henry to come into the room with a mellophone, and he tells me to go in the room with a trumpet.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's how I got the trumpet. I didn't select the trumpet. The trumpet selected me, you see. And all those other instruments that we have talked about or mentioned, they only help to improve the trumpet. And they only help improve the composer that's inside of me, you see. Because when you play more than one instrument, your range in which those instruments are sounded at increases. And therefore you understand the whole spectrum.
You also hear in your head as you're working
Yes,
on it
yes.
all sorts of things that you wouldn't have heard if you were just focusing on one instrument.
Yes, exactly.
But
So the spread is deeper.
But you must have been listening to records at the time, or
I
radio.
started.
Were you thinking that you would make a living as a blues musician, or
No.
When did you start listening to jazz?
Well, I started listening to Louis Armstrong because he played nearly every Sunday night on Ed, what's the guy's name? Ed Sullivan Show, and a lot of other programs. I started listening at that time zone, okay? I began to hear this music that people call jazz after I have been in the Army, you know. Live, I'm talking about live.
And the Army's where you learned how to notate music or read.
No, I learned all that before I went to the Army. When I went to the Army, I was already composing. I composed my first piece at 12. In fact, I composed my first piece 3 weeks after I started the trumpet. You know why? Because something inside of me said, write this down, and I did. And the moment I wrote it down, it was for 3 trumpets. The moment I wrote it down, the next couple of days, I went to school, my high school, and I got Cleo Hall and Sammy T. Scott. Those are 2 trumpet players in the school band, and myself. During noon, we rehearsed that piece, and we had our book open, the book for the fingering. So when we got to a note that we didn't know, we looked it up, and they say, okay, that's a D, so it's 1 and 3. So the person would play 1 and 3. And if we played to the next note, another person didn't know what note it was, he would say, hold it. We'd take the book and look it up and say, oh, that's an A. So it's the first vowel and second vowel. Now, I wrote that music, that trumpet music, based off of what I felt. And I started the first note, and I went up, or I went down, or I maintained the first note. And after that, I called myself a composer, you see.
You have recorded a solo album of Thelonious Monk compositions called
Yes.
Solo Reflections and Meditations on Monk. And you write in the liner notes, most people would never realize that I am closer to Thelonious Monk than to any other artist. Now, a young trumpet player coming along at the time that you came along would have been listening to Dizzy Gillespie or Clifford Brown or some of the other really influential trumpet players of the time. But you were listening to a piano player? Not that he isn't one of the greatest jazz musicians that ever lived.
You see, when I say that Monk is the closest to me, Monk, there was no separation between him and composing and performing and thinking. He was also a philosopher because he was once asked what's the meaning of life, and he said the meaning of life is death. You know, now that's not Nietzsche writing a 5-volume book about life. That's a creative artist, Thelonious Monk, understanding the principle that's very profound. You see, so when I think about Monk and how I'm close to him, I'm a composer. I don't separate my trumpet, my composing, and my thinking. Thelonious Monk spent the first part of his years in his career as being an outsider, a tremendous outsider. Same thing happened to me.
You said he spent a lot of time alone because he couldn't get work.
Yes, exactly. And the same reason I couldn't get work, you see. And so Creative Music One was a time zone from then on for about 10 years. I could hardly get anybody to employ me.
But you also your music doesn't sound very Monk-like. You don't have these angular melodic turns, the eccentric phrasing, and you don't have the kind of humor that he was famous for. So he wasn't a musical influence.
Yes, he was a musical influence. You see, you don't have to sound like your influencer to be influenced. Mm-hmm. All you have to do is have the sensibility of that person, you see. Like, for example, my national parks, the Mississippi doesn't sound like a river, you see. But it's got everything that the Creator made that river to have.
Let's talk about the national parks.
Yes.
You say that it was inspired in some way by the Ken Burns documentary?
Yes, yes.
But not necessarily in a totally positive way?
No, it was positive. It's just that I made a distinction in my understanding of the parks than they did. But I still appreciate what they did. I learned an awful lot about their conceptualization of the park, which was that the park was grand cathedrals, and that the early pioneers that fought for the park was actually spiritual leaders. Okay, that's fine with me, but I don't want to think like that. I see those parks as being the most pristine, the most valuable property that no other part of the earth has on this planet. To me, that's what a unique piece of landscape that we call a national park, which is common heritage for all of us, gone before, coming after, here now.
Do you see any irony in the fact that most of the national parks were started by a Republican president, Teddy Roosevelt, and now most of them are closed because of a Republican president?
Actually, it was that guy after the war. What's his name? Grant. 1880.
USS Grant.
USS Grant made the first national park, Yellowstone. You see, what I'm trying to say is that
he was also a Republican.
Well, cool. But see, I don't care about Republicans or Democrats or independents. They're all the same for me. You see, they're all the same. They're not really different parties. And that's why America's in such problem right now. Because when you have parties that are spectrum of each other and with a middle ground, you don't have a different party. The thing that would solve some of the problems in America would be multiple parties in every state. You see, and national parks, why is that a phenomenon that's in trouble? It's always been in trouble because Congress regulated.
Now, your national parks recording was the Downbeat Album of the Year. Mm-hmm. Also earned praise from the New York Times, the NPR Jazz Critics Poll, The Wire, many other publications. You are going to play something for us?
Yes.
What are you going to play for us?
I'm going to play you some variations out of New Orleans, a national cultural park.
Well, let me tell everyone who's listening that this is Leonard Lopate at Large, and my guest today is Wadada Leo Smith, who is about to perform live without accompaniment, although he has recorded solo albums in the past. But you didn't bring along any gamelons, any kotos, any bells, or anything else. This is just the trumpet. Wadada Leo Smith performing for us live on Leonard Lopate at Large on WBAI 99.5 FM in New York. One of the critics has talked about that piece. It says the whole larger composition as transcending the bounds of a genre or idiom. That must have pleased you a lot.
Well, it did. They caught on to a good idea that when you have traditional ways of naming parks, artists are one of the kind of a unique specimens in society. So I named the Mississippi River National Park, and also named Dr. Eileen Southern a National Literary Park. And it's not new. I did the same thing in my Great Lakes, you see. Lake St. Clair is not part of the Great Lakes, but I made it part of it through my suite, the Great Lakes.
You've written any number of large compositions
yes.
That similar to that?
To America's National Parks?
Yeah.
Yes, my 10 Freedom Summer is a 4 CD set. That's 4.5 hours of music, and then in live performance, it takes 3 days to perform it, and it's 7.5 hours of music.
And one critic called it a staggering achievement that merits comparison to Coltrane's "A Love Supreme" in sobriety and reach.
Well, look, I'm a soul made of train,
And coming up is just next month is Rosa Parks' Pure Love, an oratorio of 7 songs. So that's going to have singers?
Yes, 3 singers. Yes, 3 female singers.
How much of an extended piece, these extended pieces, is written out?
That one has 56 pages of music, and it takes 1 hour and 20 minutes to perform.
Although, as you said, some of your works actually take several
days.
to perform.
Yes.
What does that mean? How long do people actually perform and then take breaks?
10 Freedom Summer, it's the complete performance of it takes 7.5 hours. You see, and that's in live performance. The recorded is 4.5 hours. You see, So if you divide, it's more than 3 hours. I mean, more than 2.5 hours per day of music. And when we perform them, we never break. It's just one strain for the whole day. We often did it in 3 days, but once in Washington, D.C., we did it in 2 days, where we did a Friday night, a Saturday night, and a matinee on the Sunday. And that's kind of tremendous.
Well, you that has to be a big drain on on a musician, especially somebody who's playing an instrument as tough on the lips as the trumpet. Didn't you just come from recording 4 days of a new piece?
Yes. It's only a drain afterwards.
Your lips don't hurt?
No, the body hurts afterwards. But while I'm doing it, I feel no pain because the adrenaline is so high. You could probably punch at me with a nice sharp object, and I would never feel it.
I'm not going to test that.
I don't want you to test it. I just want you to know that when I'm focused, everything else goes away. And on stage, I live in my head and my heart, not in my body.
The thing you just played, your tone to some degree reminded me of Miles Davis. And you have also recorded an album called Yo Miles, which
That's
was
correct.
A tribute to Miles's later electric period.
Yes.
Do you think that most Miles fans think that everything ended when Wayne Shorter left the group?
Well, let me say this. I wished I had something to give them as a prize, and that prize would be something like not knowing who they are, because I think that an artist has a right to make whatever art they want to make, and they make it without asking anybody if they can. We made Miles electric music because we knew that I and Henry Kaiser, who put the band together, we knew that music was something that would last forever. And if you look at Miles Davis as an iconic artist of 20th century, 21st century, you find out that he was more productive than almost everybody, and his music will live longer than most people ever think that music will live.
It's also interesting that Miles put down that kind of music for many years and then finally realized that as an artist that it had something for him.
Well, enlightenment is a beautiful thing.
Sometimes I guess it takes us a while to realize where we want to go.
Yes. I mean, you can't walk until you crawl.
You've been a member of the AACM collective for the past 5 decades.
Yeah.
What role have you played in that group?
In the early stages, in the Chicago period, I helped motivate creativity. I helped open eyes about how you look at a work of art and how you make art. I show people in that organization, because when I went there, I had a bunch of stuff already done. You know, like, for example, I had written the string quartet before I went there. If you look at today, I got 11 string quartets, and I got 3 more on the table. And 10 of them is already recorded. They're just not released. So I functioned there as a guy that came in that broke all the stereotypes. And then afterwards, I'm more of a spiritual connection to the AACM, and I play whatever they ask me to as part of my responsibility, you see.
So that's why you wind up collaborating with some of the most famous post-bop jazz musicians of our time. But here you are talking about string quartets. You've written a symphony.
No, I've never written a symphony.
Oh, you have an album out that's called a symphony.
Yeah, it's called that's the orchestra one, I think. Occupies it. But I do have 5 symphonies, and they were recorded 2 years ago, but they're for quartet. They're for Jack DeJohnette, John Lindbergh, Henry Threadgill, and I. And I composed them for AECM 50th anniversary, but they've not been released yet.
And so how much of what we hear as the work of Wadada Leo Smith is actually the result of collaborations with other musicians of that caliber?
Well,
I mean, you also have got a Duo of the Year award for your work with Vijay Iyer.
Yes. Vijay Iyer, that project was a even split collaboration. Okay, but every other collaboration that I've had, I work in isolation, and I come in the studio and I distribute what should be done. You see.
Last year, you received the Religion and the Arts Award from the American Academy of Religion. Was that based on anything specific?
It was based on my career as a person that composed music that has some level of uplifting for society and some kind of understanding of the spiritual nature of humanity.
And you've often talked about spirituality as an inspiration. But you've converted a couple of times. So you took the name Wadada when you became a Rastafarian. And then, should I be calling you Ishmael? Because that's a name you took when you converted to Islam?
Ismail is my spiritual name. I have several other hidden names that also were given to me at different spiritual journeys in my life. I don't use them either. My professional name is Wadada Leo Smith. And I guess you could say that the Wadada, which comes out of Amharic, it expressed a certain beauty that I couldn't resist. The meaning of Wadada is love. It's Amharic, it's love, and it's the meaning of love and things that are love. So I couldn't resist using that. But basically, Wadada Leo Smith is my professional name. You know, just like the Pope takes a different name when he comes into office, Wadada takes a different name when he hits the stage.
Can you talk a bit about the visual musical notation language that you've developed called
Ankh-Rasmation?
Ankh-Rasmation. It's, as I understand it, it's a system of vivid, multicolored drawings that have been described as an approach to conveying ideas to another musician that leaves a great deal of room for personal interpretation. How does that work?
Yes. Well, it's a complex issue. But to simplify it, the language itself has a set of rhythm units. They have 6 sets. And it has a set of velocity units, which there are 6 each in each set. And the sets are divided into slow and fast. And the whole terminology of how you function in it deals with long and short relationships. And each of them, the velocity units and the rhythm units, once you play one set, they regenerate themselves into any other kind of set that you might have throughout the performance. And because of that, no one have to really try to figure out which of the 6 sets they're playing, because all 6 sets are based off of long-short relationships, you see. And all the sets of the velocity units are based off of the amount of energy that is a certain ratio of energy, say from 1 to 4, where number 1 has the least amount of energy, number 4 has the maximum amount, which means that there's no space. And between the slow ones from 1 to 4, the number 1 has the less amount of space, but number 4 has the maximum amount of space, you see. And but those are just nomenclatures of the language. The real core of it is that Ankh-Rasmation allows the artist to do the appropriate research and incorporate that research into musical objects.
But do musicians read it the same way that they would read traditional musical notation?
No, they cannot, because there's color there.
And also, it's been described as looking kind of like things from Kandinsky and Klee, to the point where haven't several of your, or Quite a few of your scores have been given museum exhibitions as
Yeah,
works of art.
I've exhibited in top-rated museums at the Renaissance in Chicago, at the Hammer Museum in California, the museum up in the Battle Creek Art Museum, the Museum of Rhythm in somewhere in Poland. I forget the exact town.
Denmark as well, I think.
No, I haven't exhibited in Denmark, but I've exhibited in multiple places in L.A., in San Francisco, you know.
So the other musicians have to be taught how to read this?
Yes. If you learn two of the symbols, just two of them, you can already perform, you see.
How many symbols are there?
Well, there are 6 sets of rhythm units, each with 2 in them, okay? There are 4 on this side and 4 on that side of velocity units. And then there's the create symbol, okay? And then there are other modifications of all of that are used in various ways. Like, for example, if there's a white and black rendition of a sound, okay, the white is longer, the black is shorter. But if those two sounds are colored, they got colored in them, they're simultaneously long and short. You see, and color itself must be referenced. You just don't look at the color and respond to the color, because the person that does that in my performance, they won't be on the next performance. You see, you take the color has a significant role in creation. The light spectrum is the best choice in which you look at color, you see, and the waveforms that color produces. So a person that plays any approximation score have to do research before they step out to play those 2 symbols that they have learned.
Now, you played something from your National Parks piece. Did you compose it using the system?
National Parks has Dr. Eileen Southern. There's 2 scores there. And inside of the Mississippi, mixed with the other notations, multiple velocity units.
Sounds very complicated to me, but
it's complicated, but it sounds good.
And sophisticated musicians, I'm sure, pick it up. Has anybody else applied it to compositions, or is this totally yours?
Well, see, I started in 1967. I wrote the first approximation piece. And since then, there's a lot of people that come up and do things like that, but they define them as graphic art scores. I don't do graphic art scores. Mine's are language scores. The difference between a graphic art score, or a graphic score, and my score is that my score, because of the language, it has a level of success and failure that would be achieved. A graphic score doesn't demand anything for you except you look at it and relate to it.
The same as you would regular musical notation.
No, the same as you would any picture. Yeah. Regular music notation is precise. You see, you have to actually play those notes. But in a graphic score, a yellow and a blue and a white and a brown makes no difference, because the guy is playing from being inspired visually from seeing the score. You see, but my approximation language, you have to actually read it, just like you read a note.
Now you're going to play something else for us?
Yes.
And is it something that you would have composed using this language?
Well, I'm gonna construct a piece in my head based off of that.
Right now, for us. So this is the first time anyone will have heard this piece.
That's exactly true.
Okay, well, we are about to hear for the first time a piece by Wadada Leo Smith, who is our guest today on Leonard Lopate at Large on WBAI New York 99.5 FM. Wadada Leo Smith performing live for us in our studio here at WBAI. That, as you said, was never performed before, but that was something that was would have been in the national parks.
Yes, I have a couple of music solos in there. Yeah, and that one was based around a long approximation sign.
Mm-hmm.
And
where did the name come from?
The name Ankh is the Egyptian cross. Do you remember the cross? It's called Ankh.
Mm-hmm.
That cross, the people originally found it in the pyramid text. And when you look at the pyramid text, that Ankh cross is pointing here
to the forehead.
To the forehead. This is where the pineal gland is in the body. It's pointed in the neck and in the chest and over the head. Mm-hmm. Okay, so what does it mean? It means vital life force. Mm-hmm. And Ras come from Amharic. It's Ethiopian. And it means head, like father. And Ma is probably the most universal sound on the planet. It means mother. Mm-hmm.
So every child says Ma.
Yes, exactly. So if you translate that, it means the vital life force of my father and mother. And if you translate it a little bit further, that means me.
You've said that your Leland, Mississippi, which is where you grew up, is a town so small you could walk from one end to it to the other in a minute. And here you are now with, international recognition, lots of recordings behind you, lots of compositions behind you, having played with some of the most important musicians of your time, including, unfortunately, one who just died this week, Joseph Jarman.
Yes. In fact, we're going to call that Joseph Jarman, what we just played.
Oh, really?
Yes.
And you said that at the beginning you had a hard time being understood or recognized. So are you surprised now to find yourself where you are?
No. Because, you see, I'm only doing it because I have this something inside of me says I should do it. I could care less if anybody understood me or appreciated me.
Well, you still have to make a living.
I still have to make a living, but you see, when you make art without condition, you would never starve. You know, Malachi Favors, the great bassist with Art and Summer, when we would have AECM meetings, guys would always jump up and say, well, we got to make a living. And he would always stand up and say something to the effect of what I just said, that if you make art, you don't have to worry about making a living. You see, I've never starved in my life. I've never been where I couldn't afford to live or have an apartment or a house or take care of my family. I've never worried about that. And actually, most of the young developing artists, because of the 35 years I was teaching, that was the first and the most important question they would ask me: how am I going to make a living? And my answer to them would be, why do you want to make a living when you could possibly make art?
But are you surprised you're still alive? Because you
No.
also say at 13, when you were playing the blues at local whites-only country club, you had to enter through the kitchen, and you were instructed to look neither left nor right, and above all, never to make eye contact with any of the guests.
That's correct. In fact, the owner of the building would line us up in the kitchen, and we would, of course, walk behind him, and he had two guys on each side of the hall looking to see if we deviated our eyes.
And what happened if you did? Do you say you could be killed?
You could be killed, you could be hanged, you could be shredded, or whatever. But let me tell you, you see, those laws, or rather those implied rules of engagements, they are often broken. For example, the piano player, on a number of occasions, as he's playing, women, not white women, they were white, but I call them women, they would walk on stage and sit beside him and put his arms around him, okay? And the moment they did that, everybody in the band was happy. You know why? It was over. Mm-hmm. The man closed the music out, you see.
They said the set is
finished. No, not the set, the whole thing is finished, you see. So we would get our money and go home early.
So you were always hoping for
Yes,
that.
yes.
But meanwhile, so much of your music has been devoted to the way that the country has changed in terms of civil rights. And as we mentioned earlier, soon to be released is Rosa Parks' Pure Love, an oratorio of 7 songs.
Yes.
And are you going to be performing live anytime soon?
I'm performing at Lincoln Center January 26th.
Oh,
I'm
coming up very soon.
Yes, the National Parks is being performed. The complete National Parks, we're doing 2 shows of it. And that's 10 days from now.
Mm-hmm. And who's going to be in your...
Well, Ashley Walters is the celloist. Anthony Davis is the pianist. John Lindbergh is the bassist. Ferron Oklaf is the percussionist. And Jesse Gilbert is the visual artist.
And, of course, you'll be performing
and I'll be
as well.
Yes.
And I want to thank you so much for being on our show today. It's been a great honor having you here. Wadada Leo Smith. It's been wonderful watching you perform live, too. It's rare that somebody gets a one-person concert. Yes.
Well, Leonard, I'm honored to be on your show, and thank you so much for having me.
And that brings us to the end of today's show. My great thanks to Wadada Leo Smith, to Charlie Morrow, who composed our theme music, and to my producer, Jesse Lent, who is at the audio controls today. Special thanks to Kevin O'Donohue, Nasima, and Alex Lopez of the Positive Mind Center for making their first-rate studio facilities available to us today. Leonard Lopate at Large comes to you on Saturdays at 4 and Tuesdays at noon. You can subscribe to Leonard Lopate at Large podcast on iTunes and by clicking on Robin Hood Radio's archive program site, which is robinhoodradio.com. You can also check out Leonard Lopate at Large Facebook page. We hope to see you next week.